The following program is an original production of WICC PBS Chicago.
The scorecard for Illinois Governor Rauner. He's halfway through his first term. What has he accomplished? Where has he failed? In an exclusive interview, Rauner weighs in on education, jobs, the state's finances, and dealing with the Democratic leadership. That's right now on this week's In the Loop. Good evening. I'm Chris Bury. It's been almost 2 years since wealthy businessman Bruce Rauner was voted into office on his promise to bring back Illinois. But the Republican governor has clashed repeatedly with Democratic leader Mike Madigan, whose party holds majorities in both houses of the legislature. Now, a recent survey shows Rauner is one of the least popular governors in the nation, with only a 40% approval rating. Later in the program, our Lauren Cohn sits down with the governor to talk about what's next after his rocky start in office.
Manufacturing is key to America's prosperity. It's key to Illinois' prosperity.
Improving the business climate in Illinois has been at the top of Governor Rauner's agenda since he took office 21 months ago.
Illinois, for 150 years, has been the center of manufacturing in the United States of America. Manufacturing in Illinois is core to our economy.
The millionaire venture capitalist with no political background won the election on a promise to turn around Illinois with a pro-business agenda. But Democrats insisted his policies would hurt unions and middle-class families.
I'm going to go on a tour with you. It's really cool, some of the robotics here and some of the products they make.
In a recent tour of Sandvik Coromant, a manufacturing company in Schaumburg, Rauner promoted the importance of keeping manufacturing jobs in Illinois.
Manufacturing firms employ almost 600,000 hard-working Illinois people.
But fulfilling his promises to bring more companies and jobs to the state has been all but impossible for the governor. Rauner inherited a state in a financial crisis, a budget deficit of almost $7 billion, and a pension debt approaching $100 billion. His plans to rein in spending and enact pension reform have failed in a legislature where Democrats control both houses. House Speaker Michael Madigan and Senate President John Cullerton have blocked the governor's plans to cut spending without increasing taxes.
In terms of his politics and his campaigning, he deals in the extreme. And I've said consistently that, in my judgment, the people of Illinois are not extreme people. They're mainstream people. And when we get to the election in November, I think Illinoisans are going to vote to reject extremism of Trump and the extremism of Rauner.
He should acknowledge that his budget is at least $3.5 billion out of whack, that we have said from the start, focus on the budget, not this unrelated turnaround agenda.
Natasha Korecki is a senior reporter with Politico who has covered Rauner's campaign from the beginning. She says solving the state's financial troubles will be a tough challenge for the governor without support from the Democratic leadership.
He promised to shake up Springfield, so to speak, and bring all kinds of reforms, and he has not had success as of yet. We've seen a standstill in state governing that we have not seen in the past.
The budget impasse has led Illinois to accumulate an astonishing amount of debt, not to mention an estimated $8 billion of unpaid bills. It wasn't until last July the Democratic leaders and Rauner agreed to approve a stopgap budget, which allocated $25 billion to cover the current fiscal year through December, but that's only a temporary fix.
We're going to face a lot of the problems that we were facing back earlier this year, later on at the end of the year, because a lot of these things are going to end up expiring.
Korecki says if the governor and Democratic legislators don't agree on a budget plan before December, Illinois' financial shape under Governor Rauner could deteriorate even more.
I don't think there's any question that we are worse off financially than we were before Bruce Rauner was governor. Now, who do you blame for that is, that's another longer discussion. All the ratings have been downgraded. You just look across the board. Our bond ratings are just down, so it's costing more to borrow money. We have record number of people leaving the state and businesses leaving.
With the success of his political agenda, riding on the results of the November election, Rauner has contributed millions to Republican races around the state.
Bruce Rauner himself has donated more than $16 million in this cycle to try to cut into the Democrats' supermajority in the legislature. It's just huge numbers that we've not seen.
Meanwhile, without a state budget, social service agencies that rely on public funding have had to cut back services or close altogether. And regional public universities face enrollment declines this fall, due in part to the state budget crisis. Lauren Cohn recently caught up with Governor Rauner as he kicked off Manufacturing Month.
Governor Rauner, thank you for being here. We appreciate you doing the interview.
Well, I look forward to our discussion.
Well, we are at this terrific plant, and what's really interesting is that manufacturing has been sort of the cornerstone of rebuilding Illinois. And so seeing this plant today with you is terrific. But what else are you doing specifically to bring back long-term job creation here in Illinois and keep these companies from leaving?
Well, this is the top priority for us. We need to grow the Illinois economy and create more good paying jobs. It's really got to be our number one priority. Manufacturing is the key to that. Manufacturing employs 580,000 hardworking Illinoisans today. The average manufacturing job pays over $68,000 when you include the benefits. These are good paying upper middle class jobs, and we need a lot more of them. One of the frustrations is over the years, Illinois has been the heart of manufacturing in America. But we have not been competitive now for a couple decades. We have not been as attractive for manufacturers as we used to be or as we need to be. And the numbers tell the story. Illinois has lost about 300,000 manufacturing jobs since 2000. Those are good, 300,000 good paying jobs. That's brutal, especially when we've got unfunded pensions and deficits and debt, and we need a broader tax base. And then when you look at some of the states around us, that we used to kick their tails, we used to do really well against them, they are now really doing much better than we are. Wisconsin, just to the north, they're a fraction of our size, but they've added 44,000 manufacturing jobs since the recession ended 6-7 years ago. And Indiana has added 84,000 manufacturing jobs in the last 6-7 years. Illinois has added 0.
And you've been fighting that for 2 years, but now, even with the stopgap agreement, we've been downgraded into junk status. We have high unemployment, the high taxes. It's not attractive for people to stay here. So with all of this and with these companies still leaving, what do you do when the public perception is nothing's being done in Springfield to solve any of these problems, and you hold the highest office? It's your job to bring people together.
Well, there's a lot of work being done. I mean, we are working 24/7 to grow our economy and bring more businesses here. I've actually been on the phone with manufacturing firms around the country, and I've gone to visit them. I've been to the East Coast, I've been to the West Coast, encouraging manufacturing firms and other businesses to come to Illinois. And what's exciting is dozens have told me, Governor, we'd love to come. Illinois has the hardest working people, we know it. Illinois has great transportation infrastructure, we know it. Illinois has a high quality of life, we know it, and a great location. But they say, Governor, you got to show that taxpayers matter in Illinois, and you got to show that the democracy works and that the regulations won't make us uncompetitive. I'll tell you one sad fact. I was talking to several relocation firms, the firms that advise manufacturers where to go, where to move around the United States, if they're expanding or relocating. Every one of them said, right now, the majority of their manufacturing clients don't have Illinois on their list because they'll only look at states that are pro-growth on their regulations, pro-employer. So they'll look at Texas, Tennessee, Indiana, Wisconsin, but Illinois is not on the list. And one firm said 80% of their manufacturing clients have a list. Illinois is not on the list because of our regulations.
So as a taxpayer, it seems very grim to me. So are we expecting more tax hikes?
You know what? What we need is reform. The number one thing we do is make our economy, our regulations more competitive. That's why we're advocating to get our state turned around. So for example, workers' comp reform. That's the single most important regulatory reform that manufacturers have said if we would change that, then they could be competitive and more of them will move here. We need causation in our workers' comp so that we protect injured workers on the job, but make sure that we're not reimbursing folks who have an injury, but it's not job related. It needs to be job related so we can keep the costs reasonable.
Now, it's been reported that you've said that you want to stay out of the legislative races, but it's also been reported you've contributed $16 million to Republican candidates. Is that what's it's going to take to change the supermajority so that you can get things done?
Well, it's very important that democracy be restored in Illinois. You know, we've been a one-party state for a long, long time. During that one-party rule, taxes went up, deficits went up, spending got out of control, school funding was cut, cronyism and corruption ran rampant. Democracy only works on a two-party basis, and I work for everybody. I work for Democrats, Republicans. I don't really care about partisanship. I want democracy, and democracy works on a two-party basis. That's the reason I'm advocating for two big reforms for our political system. Term limits on elected officials. Nobody stays in office longer than 8 or 10 years. That's plenty of time. Otherwise, they get entrenched with special interests and they're not responsive to the voters. And also redistricting reform, fair maps, so we can have competitive general elections.
And recent polls showed public support for that, but yet the courts didn't, so that's another fight. I'm glad you brought up education, though, because considering what's going on with Chicago public schools, should the state bail out CPS? Should they file for bankruptcy?
The state of Illinois should not bail out Chicago schools or any school districts. That's not fair or right for the taxpayers around the state. That said, we do need to change the funding formula for Illinois. You know, we are the worst state in America. We're number 50 out of 50 for state support for education. That's the reason I fought for more money for our teachers and students last year, set record level. I fought for more money this year, and every year going forward, we should put more resources into our schools, because our young people are our future. We need a great education for them. That means more resources from the state to support our local school districts, so we don't have to overly rely on our local property taxes to pay. We've already got the highest property taxes in America. It's our #1 most uncompetitive tax, and we can help relieve that burden if the state does more to help our schools.
So what do you say to when the university enrollments are dropping to those parents and those kids who have to look outside of Illinois?
Well, I tell you, again, with one-party rule for years, our university system has been cut repeatedly on state support. We're going to fight to get that fixed. We need a balanced budget, but what we really need with that is to do reforms. We need 3 types of reforms. Economic reforms, so great companies like this can grow more manufacturing jobs and increase our tax base, so we don't have to raise tax rates, we just have more tax revenue from growth. Number 2, we need political reform, term limits and fair maps. And number 3, we need government reform. We need the unfunded mandates off of our local schools and cities from Springfield. Get rid of the mandates, let each community and school district run itself, but also get pension reform that's constitutional and fair, that can save billions of dollars. Those are the things we need to get done.
Well, the pension issue is a huge issue, but if you break down the numbers, you have a certain percentage of people receiving pensions, but the majority of the people in Illinois are paying for those pensions. Why don't you think that the public perception is more on your side when it comes to this fight? What is the community not understanding about the pension issue?
Well, I tell you, when every survey of the people of Illinois that's come back, everything that we're advocating has strong support of Democrats and Republicans. The people of Illinois support fair pension reform. It's in the numbers, you can see. They know that we need to reform our pension system. The people of Illinois support getting rid of unfunded mandates and giving more local control. People of Illinois overwhelmingly support term limits and fair maps. And people of Illinois know that our regulatory burden is killing our jobs. We got to get more jobs by reducing the regulatory burden and becoming more competitive. Everything we're advocating has strong bipartisan support.
Except for it's not moving forward in Springfield.
Well, there's political reasons why entrenched interest in Springfield that have been in charge of the status quo for decades don't want to change anything. They've made a lot of money, they have a lot of power with the current system, but the current system is broken. That's why our message to the people of Illinois is, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, doesn't matter. We need good government, we need a growing economy, we need political reform, and we need to protect our taxpayers. This is reform that Democrats and Republicans can unite on. And so right now, this election is very important. This is a choice between the status quo and legislators who will support the status quo versus legislators, Democrats, Republicans who will support reform.
One of the other big issues in Chicago is obviously the violence problem, and part of your administration is working on criminal justice reform. Do you support any new changes to toughen state sentencing or gun laws that the city and police officers are advocating for?
Well, I know Senator Kwame Raoul is working on some new legislation to stiffen some penalties for violent gun crimes, and I'm supportive of that effort. I haven't seen any language yet, but I'm eager to see. One thing I was proud to sign was a law that increased penalties for gun trafficking in Illinois. I signed that bill. It is now law. And I was very supportive of increasing our state police presence in Chicago on the highways, because a lot of the violence from the gangs is spilling onto the highways. We got to keep them safe. We've upped our state police presence. But you know what, the real long-term answer, the reason we're fighting for reforms, we need more opportunity in our neighborhoods. We have brutally high unemployment on the south side and west side of Chicago. We have brutally high unemployment in many communities around the state. And frankly, Illinois has the highest unemployment rate in the African American community of any state. That's wrong.
You're a businessman. How do we get businesses to invest in those areas, to bring manufacturing plants then to the south or the southwest side where the crime is high and give people jobs?
Exactly. That's why we're celebrating Manufacturing Day. Manufacturing jobs pay well, they've got great benefits, and we can move them quickly. Companies want to come to the south side of Chicago. They want to come to the south suburbs of Chicago. They want to come to Rockford and Decatur, but we got to change the regulations so they'll come. We're not competitive. That's the reason they're going to Indiana, not Illinois. We need to change workers' comp. We need to change our legal liability system, our insurance costs, and we need to bring our property taxes down, and the regulatory, the red tape and the restrictions. Illinois has all kinds of red tape on companies. Get rid of that. Let companies compete so we can thrive against Indiana, Tennessee, Texas.
You know, I'm hearing you say all this, and you've been fighting this fight since you took office, but you announced on my radio show you were running for office. Did you think back then that it would be this difficult?
Well, I do. You know, change is hard. And Illinois has been going down the wrong road for a long time. So it knew it was not going to happen overnight. We got into this mess over 30, 40 years, deficit spending, pushing our employers out, hurting our manufacturing base, not funding our schools properly, and cronyism and corruption. This has been going on for decades. You know, I knew it was going to be hard. The key is persistence and passion. You know, I'm a volunteer. I'm not taking any compensation. I'm doing this because I was born and raised in Illinois. We raised our 6 kids. I love it here. We got the hardest working people in America, the best location of any state. We should be and we will be thriving again. We'll get these reforms done.
It even must be frustrating, though, for you because there's your camp trying to do things, and you're trying to compromise with Speaker Madigan, and the compromises haven't occurred, and people are frustrated. The latest polls show unfavorability towards you, even higher for Speaker Madigan. The latest polls came out. So it's tough for the public. It's tough for the people of Illinois.
People of Illinois are understandably frustrated. They're like, get stuff done. And that's what we're trying to do. The folks who are entrenched in power, who've been there 30, 40 years, who created the current system, they like it. They've made a lot of money from it. They don't want to change. But the people of Illinois know we need to change, and that's why I need to stay strong, but also flexible. There's no 1 or 2 or 3 issues that I say we have to have for reform. But the one thing that would be terrible to do is to get a balance, try to balance the budget only on the taxpayers, only by putting in a massive income tax hike, like the Speaker and others have said we should do. All that would do is turn us even less competitive and push more manufacturing jobs out, push more employers out, and push a lot of our families, hardworking families that can't afford higher taxes out. We can't just do a tax hike. That would be wrong.
Is there one thing then on that agenda that could bring the two together? One thing that's on the turnaround agenda that they said okay on their side, you said okay?
Well, I'll tell you what, the biggest thing we could do to change the culture and restore confidence in the future of the state is do term limits and redistricting reform so we can have competitive general elections. If we did those 2 things, that would restore a lot of the confidence for employers and a lot of the hardworking families.
And
so that would be huge.
How confident are you about November?
Well, you know what? This is a chance for the people of Illinois to have their voices heard, to stand up and push. What we're asking, even though the courts wouldn't allow, because the special interests and the powerful interests wouldn't let our voter referendum put term limits on the ballot. But what the court said is, if the General Assembly puts term limits on the ballot and redistricting reform on the ballot, then it'll stand and the people of Illinois can have their voice. So we're asking Democrats and Republicans to hold their elected officials accountable. In this election, ask them, are you going to put term limits on the ballot for us? Are you going to put fair maps on the ballot for us? Yes or no? We should demand that, both from these and from ours.
Governor Rauner, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
It's great to be with you. Thanks.
One thing Governor Rauner does not like to discuss is the Republican nominee for president. Rauner has condemned in very strong terms the recent behavior of Donald Trump without mentioning him by name. Joining us now to further discuss Governor Rauner's plan and his many challenges is Matt Dietrich, editor for Reboot Illinois, and welcome, Matt.
Thank you, Chris.
So what approach is Governor Rauner taking about Donald Trump in the wake of not only Trump's vulgar comments recorded on tape, but now we have women coming forward saying that Trump groped them What's Rauner saying about all this?
He is disavowing the comments themselves, but he is not saying a word more about his plan for, who he's going to vote for, who he's going to support. He's just said over and over again, I'm finished commenting on that. And this goes back to, in the spring, Rauner said he would support the Republican nominee. Even then, he wasn't mentioning Trump by name. And then at the state Republican convention in May in Peoria, when it was obvious that Donald Trump was going to be the nominee, Rauner gave a real barnstormer speech where he talked about the need to support the party up and down the ticket. And what he said was, there's no way Hillary Clinton gets in the White House, but he never mentions Donald Trump by name.
So as far as we know, he is still backing the nominee of his party, who's Donald Trump. He hasn't walked back from that.
He has not walked back from it, and it's a very implicit thing. If you're supporting your party's nominee, in this case, that means Donald Trump, but he's not going to say that directly. He's not going to, and I think probably that's because he doesn't want to deliver that soundbite.
Of course, some Democrats are trying to tag some kind of a connection between Trump and Rauner, and in fact, a political action committee here in Illinois is running an ad. It's from State Senator Daniel Bliss. He's behind this PAC. Let's take a listen to this new commercial that's being played.
Bruce Rauner and the Illinois Republicans support a man for president who insults women,
I'd look her right in that fat, ugly face.
I will support the Republican Party's nominee.
demeans immigrants,
They're bringing drugs, they're rapists.
I will support.
Could this kind of commercial hurt Republicans here in Illinois?
Well, the problem that Republicans in Illinois face, and what the reason for Bruce Rauner's ambivalence here, is that Bruce Rauner does not want to alienate the Republicans who are going to turn out and vote for Donald Trump. The legislative Republican candidates really need those votes. So in some cases, and you're looking at some downstate races in which you have Democrats who might be vulnerable, if the presence of Donald Trump on the ticket gets a few more Republican voters out in those districts, it could be very good for the Republican Party.
So Rauner is in a kind of a tough spot, damned if he does, damned if he doesn't.
Right. He doesn't want to turn off the Trump voters who clearly they chose Donald Trump on March 15th as their candidate in the Illinois primary. He doesn't want to alienate them. And also, a lot of those voters are very suspicious of the quote-unquote establishment Republicans. If Bruce Rauner becomes one of those Republicans who's disavowing Donald Trump by name, he becomes part of the establishment. That could discourage turnout, that could turn them against other candidates down the ballot. So
meanwhile, Governor Rauner is pumping his own money, millions and millions of dollars, into Republican races. Is this unprecedented? Have we ever seen this before? A governor putting this kind of his own cash into other races?
No, never, ever have we seen. We've never seen an office holder in Illinois with the kind of wealth that Bruce Rauner has, and with the willingness to use that wealth to self-fund his own campaign. You know, he put in $20-some million to his own election back in 2014, and he's continued to put money into his own campaign fund. On December 31st, 2014, another $20 million went into that campaign fund. And what he is able to do, thanks to the way the Illinois campaign contribution limit law was designed, it was designed by Democrats to prevent this because they never envisioned this scenario. But what he's able to do is he can take any amount of money from his campaign fund, funnel it up to the Republican Party campaign fund, and the Republican Party can give it to candidates in any amount that it sees fit.
And is there any evidence yet that all this money is moving the needle Rauner's direction?
We haven't seen that yet. And this is why on November 8th, what you're going to see is a referendum between the Bruce Rauner reform agenda and the Mike Madigan agenda, which to this point has become the anti-Rauner agenda, the Stop Rauner agenda. You are seeing Rauner pour millions of dollars into these legislative races for the House and Senate. Very soon, I suspect we're going to see the Democrats doing the same thing. How those races turn out, what the balance of the Illinois General Assembly is after November 8th, I think is going to determine what happens going forward with the state budget. As we saw in the interview, we're at a deadlock now, and neither side is giving an inch because they're rolling the dice that the voters are going to blame the other guy for the situation at our colleges, with our social service agencies, with the state now putting itself in a worse financial condition than it was at the end of 2010 when we enacted when the Democrats enacted their tax increase.
And to change public opinion, to try to move that public opinion, some of Rauner's allies have produced a documentary which is debuted this week. It takes direct aim at Democratic leader Mike Madigan. Let's take a quick listen to that documentary.
Mike Madigan is at the peak of power in the state of Illinois.
He can control whether you get your legislation passed or not.
There are those who wield disproportionate power that simply want to protect their power.
What we have in Illinois essentially is machine politics, and Michael Madigan is the king.
Just to be clear, this is not a news documentary. This is an opinion documentary. Is it likely to be effective?
I think what this documentary is going to do is the same thing that back in 2008 you had Hillary the movie, which led to the Citizens United decision. You go back to 2004, you had Swift Boat documentaries, both for and against John Kerry. What I think this documentary will do will, people who are already inclined to dislike Mike Madigan are going to dislike him more. People who are Democrats, perhaps, or who also see that Mike Madigan was, during the Blagojevich administration, he was a kind of a control on Rod Blagojevich. It's only going to, they'll view it as propaganda. I don't think it'll change anything. I do think it could educate some people on who the Speaker of the House is and how did he get to be so powerful. It's an interesting story that way because it goes back so far, and it's kind of touches back to a different era of politics.
Which is unusual.
Right.
This day and age in the country. One other factor that came up in Lauren Cohn's interview with Governor Rauner is that people are leaving Illinois. And a brand new survey is out which says nearly half of those who live here would like to leave if only they could. And they blame a number of factors. They blame taxes. They blame the weather, which we can't do anything about. They blame the governor. But what is the danger for Illinois if so many people are disgusted that they're actually thinking about actually leaving?
Well, listen, in that particular survey, the Paul Simon Institute poll, the most disturbing thing was of those 50% of people who said they would like to leave if they could, the overwhelming majority of those were younger people. Now, that's your talent base. Those are the people who are going to build Illinois and sustain its economy. They're the ones who are going to become your taxpayers and generate the wealth and strengthen the state. So
those are just the kind of people
you need to retain. You don't want to chase them out. And I think, tying into that, what we've seen this school year at our colleges, we've seen some dramatic drops in first-year enrollment at some of the public colleges.
On that very kind of scary note, we have to wrap it up. Matt, thank you for your time today. We appreciate it. That wraps up this week's show. You are now in the loop. To learn more, log on to our website, wycc.org, and link to In the Loop. Until next week, for Lauren Cohn, I'm Chris Bury. Good night.